Hey, there's
We got
Chris.
Chris sneaking in.
Chris is chiming in.
All right. Hi, everyone. Marie here from Tech and Learning. Thank you for attending day 2 of the Tech and Learning Virtual Leadership Summit. A special thank you to our sponsors, Guide K-12 Now Focus 5 Analytics, MediaSite, Prezi, Nariva, and Boxlight. I'd like to remind everyone to log into the Conference Hub using the link sent in your confirmation email. Once you are logged in, you can visit the sponsor booth and the Zoom meeting room to learn about their offerings and book one-to-one meetings. Each visit to a sponsor Zoom room earns you 20 entries to our Pathway to Prizes. We will announce the winner at the end of the conference. In the Conference Hub, you can also see your personalized agenda, network with today's attendees, and also access all of the conference resource materials in the download section. So before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions for the presenters during the session, please submit them through the Zoom chat features. Please know that we capture all questions and our presenters are happy to answer them as time permits. If there are any slides today, they will be available in the download section of the Conference Hub. And don't forget to use the conference hashtag #TLTechLive in your social media posts. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, Phil Heinz.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Marie. I appreciate it. I am excited about our next topic. I've been excited for a while now, and I know we have the absolute experts in the room. We always say, you know, the smartest person in the room is the room, and we've got that here today on esports, our topic of esports, keeping kids connected virtually. We have a wonderful panel of experts, and those experts I'll start with is Carrie Linden, and we have Chris Avilas, and we have the wonderful James O'Hagan, and Mark Depp or Deppy?
Pronounce it Deppy.
Deppy, there you go, Mark Deppy. Sorry about that. So before we kick it all off, and I'm not sure the order of who wants to present first. I would normally say ladies first type of thing, but if you've got a different way of doing it, I have no problem doing that. And when you speak, if you could tell us a little bit about your position and what you're doing, and then before you go into your program, obviously, of course, of esports. Before I let you take it over, which I'm going to do in just a second, I was thinking about this topic just a little while ago, in fact, and I said, I'm going to coin a new phrase. I'm going to call this esports are the only COVID-proof sport we have to watch and have to take part in, no matter if it's COVID-19, COVID-20, COVID-22, whatever. So isn't it great we have, you know, all the people who are missing sports, although our Cubbies are going to be on tonight, but anyway, I digress. Esports can surpass that, and as your title says of your topic, keep kids connected virtually, and I love that, and keep them safe and healthy as well in that whole process. So take it away, team. Who's going to go first?
James, do you want to start us off?
Who's going first?
I will start off. So first off, I have to say this before we get any further into any of this, is that this is not COVID proof. No. Not by a long shot. Sorry, Phil. As we found, one of the lessons learned through this, we've found just how important access is to kids and the equity of access is to kids. And that when COVID hit, we lost a lot of kids to this. Even though they have devices at home, the devices vary. They don't necessarily line up with the games that we are conditioned to normally play. But what's great is we can now, because of this, a lot of us has really started to rethink esports in a completely different mindset in a different way. So I'm going to bring up my presentation.
I stand corrected, and I'm happily standing corrected. So.
Well, let me go ahead and bring up my screen, my presentation here, if you will.
Well, while he's doing that, make sure you throw anybody that's in the session, throw your questions right into the chat so we can get those answered. I'll keep monitoring that and throw them at our presenters as we see fit.
So hopefully you all are seeing this right here.
Yes.
developing a meaningful esports experience, which again, meaningful is going to be meaningful and different to everybody. So your meaningful experience is going to be different than Chris's or Mark's or Carrie's or whatever your school district is. And by the way, just to give you a little lay of the land, if at any point any of you want to connect or follow up with any of the resources, I did put a QR code in the presentation. Just snap a picture of that, and that will get you to how you can contact me right away. So when we talk about esports, first off, this seems kind of, I don't know, I still have to do this, but it does lend to legitimacy of the program that you're looking to develop. And it starts with how you spell it. A lot of people, you can kind of, I see everybody who's involved in this smiling a little bit, but it is spelt in this format. And the reason why we say that is because, again, it does lend to legitimacy. When you see with the capital S or you see the hyphen, you know right away that, especially when it's a vendor coming at you or somebody who's just getting into this, it's usually a telltale sign of just how far along they are into the journey. And this is something that was debated for a time, but I think now the industry has kind of settled on this. And it's just important to see just how it's spelled, because branding and all this is important, because we're speaking to what kids want. The legitimacy of the program is what kids are going to see. And when they see it, the spelling in one certain way or another, it is important to make sure that we do it right. Because this is something that can be truly transformative for not just your low-hanging fruit kids, but for all kids in your school. The demographics of those who are participating in esports go across the gamut. This team right here that you see, this is our Horlick High School Rebels, and they, as you can tell, are a very diverse team. They actually not only were runners-up in our Overwatch state championships this past year, but they also got the whole state's sportsmanship award. So,
James, can you tell us where you're from or where you hail?
Oh yeah, sorry, James O'Hagan. I'm in Racine, Wisconsin. Sorry, I thought you did such a good job introducing me earlier, Phil. So
I missed that point, so I want to make sure we got that point across. Racine, Wisconsin.
Yep, I'm the director of digital and virtual learning. Sorry. So I oversee 5 different esports teams, but this one to me really is probably the closest that we're looking to as our goal. One of our goals that we have in our Racine Unified School District is making sure that our cross-section of our esports team matches the cross-section of our school's population. So this one probably gets to the closest. And as you can tell, again, it's a very diverse group of kids. And again, esports is for everybody. And the meaningful experience for us is when we can get all these kids together in a space and get them engaged in school, the differences that can make. And where a lot of people typically start, and they start and focus right when they start, is in the players and the games. And where actually they miss a lot on is the beautiful ecosystem that there really is around esports in education. Because when I show you this, and I know Mark's going to appreciate this one because this comes from UCI's research team, you see that the ecosystem is much broader than what you see as at the focus. You know, everybody asks, the first question typically asked is, what games do we need to buy and what computers, or what games do we need to play and what computers do we need to buy? And again, if we're going to create a meaningful experience through esports, we really need to think beyond the games and the computers and really start to think of all the different roles that everybody can have. Not just the soft skills that you can develop, because that's there as well too, but really flipping a paradigm. It goes beyond just saying it's soft skills and it's STEM, because there's a lot of non-STEM related into this as well. There's missing from this org chart, or this, not this org chart, but this chart is the health and wellness component that's very key to all this. And a lot of people don't think about esports when they think health and wellness, but when you talk about something that is so intrinsically motivating to kids, such as esports and video games, and you can start to then, instead of having to gamify everything to get kids to do things they wouldn't normally do, but take the things that they are doing and bundle it into what you're trying to teach, now it becomes just a completely different mindset of how you can use esports as an educational tool. Because for us, esports truly is an educational tool. So what do you want to accomplish? So with our esports teams, we want to do 5 things in the Racine Unified School District. This is what we want to accomplish. Your school may vary, your accomplishments may vary, but I wanted to give you an example of what we're trying to do. Number 1, we want to redefine our athletic culture. We know that our athletic culture in our schools are very gender oriented and ability focused. We want to make sure that we give something for everybody so that they have an authentic competitive experience. We want to diversify opportunities for student participation. We want to give all kinds of kids from all walks an opportunity to participate in something, because we know when we do, two things happen. GPA goes up and attendance increases. And if GPA and attendance are up, that usually means that graduation rates are also going to increase. We want to increase those career and collegiate scholarship pathways. Again, we want to promote good mental and physical health. And again, when you talk to kids and you say certain things like, if you drink a lot more water, if you get better sleep, you're going to be a better gamer. Then you know that now you're, instead of taking an extrinsic and saying, let's do this, you're now taking their intrinsic passions and making them realize, oh, I can be so much more with things that I already love and do. And finally, we need to honor the importance of play. We in schools have not done a very good job in the last 20 years of honoring the importance of play. You look at playgrounds, you look at where recess has gone. Even a couple of years ago, the state of Louisiana tried to pass a bill to actually legislate recess into the school day. Like they felt it was that necessary. So we need to find ways to honor the importance of play. And this is the realm. Video games is a realm where kids are choosing to play. So when I talk about esports and education and trying to make a meaningful experience, I take all these things and I put it into a one-page document. I really just kind of condense it down into something that is going to speak to not only to myself, but also to any school board members, community members, because the hardest question to answer is, well, what can you tell me about esports? And it's like, well, how much time do you have? And what angle are you taking it from? Because there's so many different ways you can think about esports. But this right here, if I ever have to go in front of a school board, these are the talking points that I really use. These are the things my general managers speak from as well. We all share a common language and common goals around it. And really it goes into stating the program overview, writing a short paragraph about each one of your goals, making sure you have your contact info in that one pager, and also linking to your supporting materials so that if people want to learn more about what this is and dive in on their own, you're leading them to good things for them to look like, because there's a lot of misinformation out there right now about esports. There's a lot of companies, private companies especially, that are getting into this field who really they're kind of sorting their way through, but also making, turnkey solution promises. None of this is a turnkey solution. Everything to me, if we're doing esports properly, is going to be on a customized basis. And this even here is one I wrote specifically for my school district, the Racine Unified School District, around each of our strategic goals. I was able to take every single one of our strategic goals and write to specifically how esports fit into it. And if you can do that, that's usually the first step to helping to develop a meaningful experience with esports in your schools. And if you have other questions, you can link with me at linktree/Jim O'Hagan, or I also do a podcast called the Academy of Esports Podcast. Mark Deppy's been on there. Chris Avilas has been on there. Actually, all the panelists have been on. So yeah, you can check that out as well too. And that's my time.
Great segue and good timing. Amazing timing. You must get that from being a gamer.
Well, I'm actually probably one of the worst gamers you'll ever meet, to be quite honest. I'm a terrible gamer.
Well, you've learned. So who's up next?
I can piggyback off of that.
Carrie, tell us about where you're from and what do you do?
I'm based in California. My name's Carrie Linden. I am the Chalk Muju on Twitter, TheChocmoojoo. I am the communication specialist for Liminal Esports. I co-run the Esports EDU weekly panels, live panels with Jim O'Hagan. And I used to be a middle school teacher. Have a master's in education, and I used to run a local gaming and content creation program locally here in Southern California. My focus has sort of long been on increasing diversity and inclusion within the esports education world, and making sure that programs are lush and full and not just competitive focus. As James showed you, that sort of the framework document that comes out of NASEF, the environment around esports is huge, and there's a lot of different avenues for that. So if you're just focusing solely on competitive play and you're looking at your esports team as just athletes, you're missing the opportunities for providing education and potential, career growth in other avenues that relate to the gaming and esports world. Things like shoutcasting, content creation, marketing, coaching, event production and management. There's so many other things out there, and I think a lot of people, especially when they're new to getting into esports, focus on just one dynamic dynamic, which is the gameplay, that they really do a disservice to their student population by not, addressing and including all these other aspects into their programs. One of the things that's really important about including all these things into your program is that it allows for a wider diversity of students. You're going to find that a lot of kids might not identify themselves as gamers, even though they play games. My year that I took doing substitute teaching, I pulled every single class I went into. I found out what games they were playing and whether they self-identified as gamers. And what I found is girls, generally, female identifying students, don't self-identify as a gamer nearly as often as male identifying students do, even though they're playing games daily. So if you allow them an avenue into a gaming program that isn't necessarily competitive gaming specific, you're going to be able to kind of get them in, and they'll sort of self-identify kind of later on. You also need to make sure that your esports program is reflective of your student population and interest. This is really important because for a long time, a lot of esports programs were focused just on pro circuit titles. So you've got like the games that you see in the pro leagues, and then they sort of get funneled out a little bit because when you're working in the education industry, not all levels of academic esports are going to allow you to play first-person shooter titles or even third-person shooter titles. So you'll see some of those dissipate. So you're left with games like Rocket League. League of Legends is still really common. Overwatch is another one that's pretty common. Sometimes in the high school levels, you'll still see it. CSGO. Fortnite is a shooter that's been able to sneak into both middle school and high school leagues pretty efficiently. I think the kind of cartoony nature of it has left a lot of administrations to overlook it. But those titles are still really strongly marketed to one demographic, and it's not necessarily reflective of the entire population of gamers. So if you are an esports educator, you need to look at what games are popular across the demographic of your student body and make sure that you're representing each of them. So that means putting in alternative titles. Minecraft can be a great one for it. You got to look and see what people are playing. Fighting games might be really popular with certain demographics. So if you don't have a game like Smash, you might be sort of like missing out on a particular group of people. So you want to make sure that your esports program is diverse as possible so that you're actually representing the population that you have. All too often people will say, well, we're absolutely encouraging female identifying students to come. We let them play, like they can be here, but just letting somebody show up doesn't mean that you're creating an environment for them that's representative of them, that meets their interest, and that's respectful of their needs. And that goes to not just female players, but LGBTQ, various populations of color. Like you've got to look and see what people are playing, and you've got to make sure that your program represents their interest. And sometimes that's even a difference in playing style. You've got some demographics that like to play remote and online, and you've got others where the culture is very community-based, where people are going and they're doing LAN tournaments where everybody's in the same building. So you've got to really put in the time and do your research and be willing to change and adapt. And then again, change and adapt, because your population isn't always going to stay the same. There's going to be changes. You're going to realize that maybe something you were doing before wasn't quite hitting the mark, and you're going to have to turn around and add something different the next year. So you've got to make sure that you're making these assessments. If your program doesn't reflect your school's population, you're doing something wrong. If you can't take a poll in your classroom and see the exact same breakdown culturally, demographically, that you see in your school site, you need to have a really hard look at what you're doing in your program, and you need to make changes, and you need to do it now. Right,
so you're saying that competitive Pac-Man is not a thing anymore, by chance?
Competitive everything is a thing.
Okay.
I've had kids promote Overcooked as a competitive title, and it can be. I had somebody just ask me the other day, why isn't speed running a competitive game? I'm like, what do you mean? Speed running has long been a competitive thing. It's just that people can create this very narrow vision of what esports is. There are so many game titles that you can turn into an esport. It just takes you being willing to to find the way to create a competitive structure around it. So if you're one of those people that had a knee-jerk reaction, I want to say Minecraft, because Minecraft is a really topical one in regards to esports right now. 8 months ago, when I would have conversations with people about Minecraft being used for esports, I would get laughed at. That's not an esport title. And now people are totally buying into it being an esport title. There's a huge movement to incorporate it into people's esports programs. So you have to be able to get over yourself. You have to be able to get over the ego and go, okay, my kids really like this. This allows more players to get into the competitive circle. How can we make this an organized competitive game? Because a lot of games can be adapted for a scholastic esports setting. You just have to be willing to put in the work and do it.
Okay. Well, we do have a quick question. Randy threw up his hand. He wants to ask a question. So if you wouldn't mind, panel, I know we have 2 more panelists that have got some great stuff to share, but let's throw a question right in the middle of this and see who wants to take that competitive answer. Go ahead. Randy.
Thank you, Phil. Hey, Carrie, I liked your point about targeting, sort of the underrepresented groups, because it is a lot of the first-person shooters and action-type games. But what do you recommend in terms of marketing and maybe submitting the input from those, or requesting the input from the people that aren't being represented? Because we started our team last year, and it was 14 boys and 1 girl. Who played Smash, she did, but we didn't really market it that way. We did. So what would you recommend for that?
One is visibility. If you aren't making these other demographics visible within your program, you're doing a disservice to your student population. So if you're attending conferences, you should be putting together panels that are diverse. If you are having promotional imagery or using any imagery in your classroom, it should be diverse. It shouldn't just be, here we're highlighting all male teams, or here's all these male streamers, or everybody's white. Like you can't do that. You have to make sure that your program is representing a diverse population of people. The other thing is do student surveys. Go out and poll your student body, get permission to ask, what are you playing? How long do you play it? Who do you play with? You can ask everybody and then come back and check and see what the makeup of your school actually looks like. And you might find that you have a pool of students that are all really into the same game or the same genre, and you just haven't been offering that. So I think, actively going out and beyond one class, because a lot of times, they might all be in your a tech class or a computer science class. So go beyond that, push into a couple other classrooms or the whole school if you can, depending on the size of your program, and make sure that you're asking the people who haven't shown interest. And it's a good thing to ask why people don't join, because sometimes, there are really easily overcome issues that bar people from thinking they can join an esports club or an esports team. And that can be addressed once you know that those roadblocks exist.
All right. Well, before we move on to the next, actually, I want to go to the next speaker, but Steve, there's a gentleman by the name of Steve Bourbon that's on. He has a question too. If we could hold your question till after the next speaker so we can kind of mix it in here. So who's next to speak?
I believe I'm next to speak.
All right, Chris, take it away and tell us where you're from too.
So my name is Chris Aviles. I'm a classroom teacher for the Fairhaven School District here in New Jersey. And I'll share my screen real quick, because what I want to talk to you about is how, well, that would be the wrong screen. That would be, 1 second. There we go. So what I wanted to share is, you guys see my slides okay? No?
You had it up before, whatever you had up before.
There we go. Good?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I don't Zoom too often. So what I wanted to talk about from an esports perspective is how you can build a community within your school and within your larger area. People kind of can get involved in your school. And so to that sense, I kind of stumbled upon this on accident. I started the first middle school esports team in the country about 3 years ago. And because there were no other middle schools to play, right, the FH Knights, we didn't have much competition. And so what I decided to do is I reached out to some of our colleges in the area, and I reached out to Rutgers University. I said, I know you guys have a Rocket League team. My kids are looking for some competition. Would you mind playing with us? And they couldn't have been more gracious. And so, you know, our first match was actually against Rutgers. Our first couple matches was actually against Rutgers. And what I noticed is that my kids really became interested in finding out more about college life and how that works with esports. And so what I started to do was after the matches, we would set up a Skype call, and my kids would talk to some of the Rutgers students and hear what they're majoring in, hear what role, if any, video games play in their life or their career choices. And they really got to hear from a diverse range of students who were saying that, video games are really something I'm passionate about. I'm a gamer and I want to major in something like cybersecurity and then maybe go work at an esports, firm or something like that. And that's important to realize because we're always preaching STEM jobs and we're always trying to, look for these STEM jobs. And it turns out that esports is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. And so if we're serious about placing kids in STEM jobs or making sure that they know where to look for some of these lucrative competitive jobs, right, there's a good chance it's going to be in the esports ecosystem. And so, playing Rutgers and even talking to some of their alumni who now work for the New York Excelsior, who's the Overwatch League or Overwatch team of New York, right? My kids really got to hear about how they can follow their passion from gaming, right, through school into college if they chose to. And I think, one of the most exciting students that my kids talked to was a student who just said, I really love video games, but I'm going to be an accountant. And, I'm going to be an accountant at, an esports firm. And so hearing that not only are there these STEM jobs, but there's also more traditional jobs. And again, a lot of the kids at Rutgers became near peers and mentors to my kids. You can see, in the second year, we started to play face-to-face and we put on a nice little event for parents where the kids and the college students would play with each other. And then they would have a talk afterwards about life and, life in college and how they can get there. And it's something that I've built on over the last couple of years. Last year, we brought in Stockton, and they were the Rocket League ESL champions that year. And so they got to see the medals that the college kids won and got to talk to them and meet with them. And again, hear about careers and how they can be part of that pipeline that they follow from middle school through high school into college. And from that, we got all these different opportunities. 2 years ago at ISTE, they had an esports tournament in the vendor area where my kids were invited to play against some of the college kids and the high school kids again, because it was so hard to find middle schoolers back then. But just the fact that, I kind of prepared my kids that, well, if you're not playing, you're going to be an esports ambassador. So be ready for people to come up to you and ask you, what is this thing going on here? And so my kids got to share, with people at ISTE and beyond. They've written articles for my blog and some of the magazines and newspapers in our area. And so it's really just become something where students can share their passion. Because I think one of the things that we have to be careful of is, and I think Carrie alluded to this, there are a good portion of students who define themselves as gamers. And I think there's even a bigger portion who maybe are afraid to define themselves as gamers. But we as parents and teachers, and I guess people in authority, we're very quickly to dismiss gaming as something that's important. And so here you have a group of kids that are defining who they are as a person, or, and then we're saying it's not important or it's a waste of time. So I think that we have to find ways, and part of that is through esports clubs and schools, but to validate what kids are doing, because it is going to be, a big place where they can find jobs in the future. But also, again, speaking social emotionally, it's a lot of who some of these kids are and who they want to be. They see themselves as gamers. And I can tell you some of that is because some of my kids aren't big enough to play traditional sports. Some of my kids have physical disabilities or learning disabilities that make traditional sports hard for them, but they have found a home on my team that they might have found elsewhere. And to continue to build that, we will go out and this is at Stockton University. Stockton invited us, to play in their esports arena. So we played, at Stockton, and then we got a campus tour. So it's a great way, again, to continue to bridge that gap. But I think the other big thing It's, the colleges are great. We, an initiative I'm doing, we've recently partnered with the Army, and the Army is showing how you can follow the pathway into the military and then a career, because they too have an esports team. And then I learned recently that they also have basically, if you're not on, maybe the professional team, they use Discord to have their own tournaments and bases kind of play each other. So it's a recreational activity for those in the military that's spun up, in the last 5 or 8 years. And it's been, something that has helped, from talking to some of the soldiers, something that's helped them pass the time and again, feel part of the community in the military. But it's also, esports is a great way. We heard James talk about it, to bring in an underserved population of students, right? There are a group of students that have no homeschool connection in your school. Again, maybe they're not really into traditional sports, or they're not really into clubs, right? Esports and gaming might be their thing. And so making this space, I think really starts with having a strong code of conduct that lays out how we're going to treat each other and how we're going to be respectful towards each other. But then building on that, because my favorite thing when I polled my kids when we first started, I said, what was your favorite part about esports? And I thought they would say, oh, we really love the competitions, or we really loved going to play other colleges. And it turned out their favorite thing to do was go get pizza together after the matches. And I didn't even know they were doing that, but they were all walking to the pizza place together after school or after the match, and they were hanging out. And so where our students were maybe going home after school and just gaming by themselves, they have a newfound friend group, right? We're bringing, quote unquote, gaming out of the basement, and we're making it more and more social. And so, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that this can be something that is very motivating, as a way to improve GPA, as a way to improve attendance, because kids feel like they belong. Right. I know, and I'm sure James does, and Mark as well, participation on our esports team has to do with behavior in school, has to do with attendance, have to do with having good grades. And that seems to be a motivator for a lot of students who maybe struggle in those areas. And what has been amazing to watch is, as we've built that community, as we've built that pipeline, my middle school was definitely the first in our area. I graduated my 8th graders to our sending high school. Those 8th graders started an esports team in our high school. And so one of the events we did at my school before COVID broke out was we had an alumni night. I invited back all my kids who graduated and, other kids from the high school. They played against my kids. So we had another match, but then they talked about what high school life was like. And so many of my kids were now more excited to go to high school because they knew that they could be part of the esports team, and they knew that they had kids that they had already formed a bond with would be at the high school waiting for them. And now you factor in in New Jersey, we've relationships with Rutgers and Stockton, and Seton Hall and a lot of these universities. Now my kids are talking about they can't wait to go to high school. Now they can't wait to go to college because they're seeing and talking to and building relationships with people that are already in the space. And these are my kids, and I'm excited for them to feel like they belong, to feel like they're part of a family, and really start to think about their futures where maybe they weren't doing that as much before they joined the esports team. So I think one of the important things to keep in mind as you're building your esports team, and you're not going to find a more competitive guy than me. I've wrestled my entire life. I coached varsity sports here in New Jersey for 12 years. More than anything, it's about helping our students feel like they belong, feel like they're part of something, and building up this community that raises everybody up. Because as Carrie alluded to, right, sometimes gaming can be a little too toxic. And this is a great way to be a role model and have role models in your school, have near peers if you build your relationships with your local colleges and universities. It's a fantastic way to make sure, like everything we're doing as teachers, is that we're educating the whole student, right? We're making them feel like they belong. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. If and when you bring an esports team to your school, we want to make sure that it is something that is socially, emotionally going to build them up.
All right, great, Chris. That's awesome. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for being so brave to bring middle school into the picture. I've always wanted to do that with some of my programs as well. Before we get on to our last speaker, I want to honor what I said and have Steve ask his question. So Steve, if you want to jump on and unmute yourself and ask your quick question.
Hey, how are you? Thank you kindly. So I'm actually elementary, and I'm wondering whether or not there's any feasibility or any recommendations around being able to find some way to launch any semblance of like an esports program for upper elementary, like third through fifth. I'm seeing the head nod, so that's good. I actually want to throw a couple other questions that may be sort of a little tangential to this. One is that I know there's been some discussion around kind of like managing the toxicity of the culture, but is there any recommendation on how it is that that discussion can be ongoing and can kind of brace students for what they are likely to encounter? Because I feel like in a lot of cases, some of the most toxic behavior I see comes from some of the discussion that surrounds the gaming community and people within it. And then lastly, for me, a lot of this seems sort of like it's going to be dealt with the same level of wariness that a lot of like computer science and coding and programming programs sort of were met with several years ago, insofar as people being early adopters. And so I'm wondering whether or not there's any recommendation on how it is that something like this can be introduced to school leaders or administration or even colleagues to be able to kind of sell the merit and the worth of a program like this, like however it's managed, however little is used to build it at first, but just sort of like what that discussion would look like for some people that that discussion is literally the first entry point into even like what esports is. But thank you kindly, and I'll step back now.
Thanks
Absolutely. Lonely Mountain Downhill is a great game for teaching elementary level. The only like damage that you see is like confetti, and you can turn the confetti off. It's a great title because it's essentially like a speed running course, but the course is different depending on how you want to take it. So you can actually sit groups.
When you get a chance.
Yeah. So you can actually have processing groups to like tackle, each particular run and talk about why that run is particularly better. They can practice it. There's a lot of replayability. Overcooked, any of the games in that family can be a great cooperative esport title. Anything you can speed run, and there's lots of different games you can speed run. So there are quite a lot of E for everybody. ESRB rated titles that you can turn into esports. And I think the key thing for elementary is bridging curriculum. So for me, when I was running my youth gaming program, we would talk about game designs. We'd play a game, but when we take it apart, how do the developers cue you in to going into a certain direction or not going into a certain direction? So you're teaching analysis. You can have them write. They can be writing guides. They could be writing walkthroughs. They could be doing reviews. Like there's so many ways that you can bring cross-curricular tie-ins to the beginning of an esports or gaming program to make it much more palatable to an elementary level administration. So it's definitely doable. And as far as like starting the communication about toxicity, when I was subbing anything like I'm a middle school teacher, but I subbed from kindergarten to middle school. And when I found like second grade is when you start hearing the boys say that girls don't game, and it's when you start seeing the girls pull back their self-identification as gamers. So you're gonna find it if you're starting a program 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, it's already gonna be there. So starting that conversation, making sure that you're providing representation of female gamers is key. And again, that's your curriculum, making sure that you've got a diverse range of people that you're showing and exposing your students to, and also having like a zero tolerance policy for that. So if a boy says, well, girls don't game, or they're not as good as esports, that's a no. And not only is it a no, it's a no, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack that. And that's going to look different at different age levels. You can't have the same conversations with a second grader that you can with middle school. But when they're older, you can absolutely talk about girls not getting as much game time or not being able to use comms, and this is why, and how that sometimes affects how you can practice and how you can play. So you're tweaking it and saying, well, you might be able to play 5 hours at the end of your day, but if you're female and you're trying to play this competitive game and you can't use your comms because you're getting harassed, your practice sessions look totally different. And that's setting you up potentially for a disadvantage unless you can find a group that's safe for you to scrim with. So there's lots of meaty conversations that you can have with kids. You just have to make sure that you present them in an age appropriate way.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. I want to make sure we have time for Mark here. And Mark, realizing that, you know, our end time is 12:45, but we're going to continue this on a little bit so that you can have your full time, and that if anybody has any questions, we won't close this Zoom until about 1 o'clock. So go ahead, Mark, do what you got to do.
Perfect. I prepared about 2 hours of content, so I'll take my time. My name is Mark Deppy. I have a couple roles in esports. One is I direct the esports program at the University of California, Irvine. We were one of the early adopters in college esports, the first public university to create a varsity program. Been around for 4 years, which makes us ancient in the world of college esports. I also am involved with an organization many of you should check out. It's called NASEF. I serve as the commissioner and kind of advisor for that. It's a scholastic esports organization using esports to connect games and student interest to learning and career preparedness. So several panelists here are involved with that, and certainly something to check out. But I just want to touch real quickly on what it looks like in higher education. The first college esports program was started in 2014 at Robert Morris University in Chicago. And since then, it's kind of been going gangbusters. A lot of universities are looking to boost enrollment, engage students, be a differentiator in an increasingly competitive higher education world. And so what started in 2014, now we have probably in the neighborhood of 200 schools offering some sort of scholarship for esports. And it could be very broad or very, very different focuses, from we're just trying to boost enrollment to we're trying to win every national championship under the sun. And so it's just something worth looking at and checking out. Some of the schools I think that are doing it really well, other than my university, are Boise State and University of Utah. I'd also say Miami of Ohio, groups that are really connecting esports to the academic mission. So things to think about. But our program does 5 things. We have our 5 pillars, like James has. Our first pillar is around competing. We think the competitive side of esports, while not the only thing, is certainly kind of a central pillar of everything else. So we offer scholarships, coaching, team psychologists, exercise physiologists, academic support for our scholarship players. And we compete in League of Legends, Overwatch, and Super Smash Ultimate. All of our teams have competed at very high levels, including every one of our teams has been in the national championship match, and our 2018 League of Legends team actually won it. So we're perceived as a great competitive team. But I think the reason people look to us as role models is that we also do many other things with our program. The second is promoting academics and research. We throw kind of the only academic peer-reviewed research conference that I'm aware of. And so I will send a link in the chat if you'd like to come, but it'll be in October, all virtual. It'll be our 3rd annual one. So you'll see peer-reviewed academic research. You'll see high school and collegiate practitioners, as well as esports industry folks there. So something worth checking out. The third thing we do is around community engagement, making the world a better place through games. We've heard a lot of people talk about the issues with gaming and esports, and there certainly are lots of them. And I think from a public research university, we really have to lean into those. And so we're trying to work on diversity issues. We have a diversity task force, a diversity game plan. We do outreach camps. We've done camps for low-income students. We've done camp every single year, focusing on elevating women in games. The last question was about toxicity. We actually have piloted and built bystander intervention training. So we train everyone in our program to both identify problematic behavior and not just watch it happen, but it's to engage with it. And it's a really hard thing to convince gamers that they need to be a part of the solution, but it's something we do. Obviously, we work with NASEF. Some of the people that spend a lot of time on it work with me at UCI. Fourth thing we do is around content creation and entertainment. So we have a great broadcast program. I think we were actually the first ones, now thinking about it, to build a shoutcasting program. So we teach and pay and train students to do in front of camera live play-by-play color commentary, as well as the behind the camera production, graphic design, video creation, a lot of cool stuff. Boise State's got the best stream these days, so you should certainly check out their Twitch page. And the fifth and final thing we do is around career development, helping our students, one, tell their story about why competing in games and being a part of our organization helps them do anything they want in life, but also to connect them to career opportunities. They all get resume building support. Everyone graduates with a great resume. We do career panels, networking nights with the industry, but we're really trying to be a part of like the college mission of taking raw talent when it comes into our campus, polishing it up a little bit and sending them out to the world to be the leaders that we want them to be. So I think that's the stuff I wanted to cover. Happy to answer any questions, but I want to be respectful of time. So I'll link the conference website. You can also check us out at esports.uci.edu. That's our homepage, and we have a lot of resources and stuff on our website as well. So appreciate the time, and that's what's happening in college.
We'll put both of those links into the chat right here, and that way we've got it captured for future reference. And as was mentioned before, the recording of this whole presentation will be available at, I believe, at the end of the day, possibly this weekend, right at the conference hub. And if you're tweeting about this, make sure you include the hashtag TL Tech Live. Great information, folks. I really appreciate your time and your expertise in this. So many districts are wanting to do this, and I love the fact that it truly engages every walk of life in our schools, and I really think that's awesome. Whether it's every walk of life as a student, but I can imagine recruiting, other teachers that wouldn't be likely to do gaming, but maybe they want to get involved in some of their students' lives from an engagement standpoint, and this might be their opening to do that, to sponsor a team like this. So I think lots of potential. I've seen the great work that a lot of you have done already, and this is just the beginning. That's the cool thing, is this is like the tip of the iceberg of where this is going. So anybody else have any final questions? You want to put them in the chat, or you know what, we got a couple minutes. If you want to unmute yourself and throw out that question right now, would be a great time to do that.
Well, there's one little thing that I did want to touch on, was that when we're talking about building a program, I think you've heard different ideas from everybody in all this. And I know that, I'll take Chris's program because they're probably most mirrored to what we're doing. The huge difference though, and I think, again, this goes to, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to change your school? One of the things that I've actually pushed against in our state association is a grade check requirement. I really feel that, given the demographics of my community that I serve, we have a high poverty rate. We have reading test scores are so low. Graduation rates are low compared to the rest of the state. For us, I took lessons I learned from the Rockford Public Schools and the athletic director there, who said, you know what, we've got to make sure that we have these kids off the streets and that we have them with a positive adult interaction. Grade checks for us come secondary. It is for us, because again, of where we are. And again, this is just to juxtapose how esports can be used differently for different schools. We use grade checks as a secondary, but first we want to keep kids off the street. We want to have a positive adult interaction, because we know in the mental health crisis that we have in our community, and where we're seeing, our ACE scores and things of that nature. We know the two ways that you push against the mental health crisis is, one, with a positive adult interaction, and the second is through play. And so that's where, again, you can look at your program and say, what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we trying to accomplish it using this amazing, intrinsically motivating thing that kids love. But again, as to Carrie's point earlier too, you have to invite them. You have to make that invitation to learning you have to go to those hard to reach places and find those hard to reach kids, and then really invite them in and give them the opportunities to come in and explore and check it out.
Wow, great way to wrap it all up. Anybody else with final questions at all? I didn't see any, but I might have missed one in the chat. So if you've got it, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that question. Otherwise, we'll close up the panel for today. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I honestly believe, and I'm glad that Mark does one, I honestly believe we could have a tech and learning version of the conference here on this, and then have separate breakout rooms for each of your specialties that you're talking about here as well. And that might be something we talk to Christine about to see if we can make that happen. But thank you very much for this time. And I know people probably want some hands-on to learn how to do this as well. We didn't even get into the aspect of inventories of equipment and all of that aspect. And I'm glad we didn't, because this is way more than just that. But, there is that piece of it. There's the logistical piece of that too, that we probably should go into down the road. So if you have some recommendations, team, on some of that equipment, if you want to post that as well, or a link there, that'd be cool. But thank you, everyone. And I'm going to close out this Zoom session. Have a good day, everyone. And don't forget the happy